The security guard humiliated a black couple, refusing them entry to a luxury hotel. A week later, he discovered they were the new owners. His world collapsed, but the real reckoning was yet to come. What happened next would shock even those who've seen it all. But let's start from the beginning. James and Monica Harrison, a young and successful black couple, pulled up in front of Crystal Tower, one of the most exclusive hotels in downtown Los Angeles. The towering glass facade reflected the city lights, exuding wealth and power. Every inch of the place whispered luxury, from the polished marble steps to the uniformed staff stationed at the entrance. James stepped out first, adjusting the cuff of his tailored navy suit. Monica followed, her white dress flowing effortlessly around her as she looped her arm through his. They belonged here. Anyone with eyes could see that. Yet, as they approached the entrance, a figure stepped in front of them, blocking their path. Greg Simmons. Tall, broad-shouldered, his stance firm. The name on his security badge meant nothing to James and Monica, but his presence spoke volumes. "Excuse me, but this hotel is for guests only," Greg said, his voice carrying that unmistakable weight of authority. The kind that didn't invite argument. James frowned, taken aback. "We are guests." Greg barely reacted. No hesitation, no second glance. His verdict had already been made. "I don't think so. This is a luxury establishment, sir. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Monica's grip on James tightened. The air turned heavy, charged with an unspoken challenge. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice smooth but edged with steel. "What makes you think we're not guests?" Greg's lips pressed into a firm line. "I don't have to explain myself. Leave, or I'll call the police." There it was. James exhaled slowly, the humiliation simmering beneath his skin. He could argue, demand to speak to management, create a scene, but he knew how this story usually ended. With voices raised, authorities called, reputations smeared. So he made a choice. Without a word, he took Monica's hand, ready to walk away. But just before they turned, Monica spoke, her voice quiet, sharp as a blade. "You'll regret this," Greg scoffed. As they walked back to their car, heads turned. Some guests averted their eyes, others watched with uneasy curiosity, but no one stepped forward. No one said a word. They never did. The video spread like wildfire. A shaky phone recording captured every moment. The dismissive tone in Greg Simmons's voice, the way James and Monica Harrison held themselves with quiet dignity, the sharp finality of Monica's parting words. Social media erupted in outrage. Classic racial profiling. How is this still happening in 2025? He thought they didn't belong. The irony. Thousands shared the clip, tagging the hotel's official accounts, demanding answers. News outlets picked up the story. Celebrities, activists, even former guests of Crystal Tower condemned the incident. Yet, within the hotel's walls, Greg Simmons barely blinked. He had worked security here for over a decade. He knew who belonged and who didn't. Or so he thought. 1 week later, an emergency staff meeting was called. Attendance was mandatory. The tension in the air was thick as employees filed into the grand conference room, murmuring among themselves. Greg walked in last, arms crossed, mentally bracing himself for the usual HR speech about company values and social responsibility. A slap on the wrist at best. Then he saw them. James and Monica Harrison stood at the front of the room. But they weren't guests. They weren't customers. They were the new owners. A strange, sinking feeling twisted in Greg's gut. His body stiffened, but there was nowhere to run. The general manager, Richard Calloway, cleared his throat, his voice steady but cautious. "As you all know, Crystal Tower was recently acquired by new investors. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, the new owners of this establishment." The silence was suffocating. James took the microphone, his expression unreadable. "Crystal Tower has always been a symbol of excellence," he said, his voice calm, controlled. "My wife and I have admired this hotel for years, which is why we made it our mission to take it to the next level. But excellence isn't just about luxury. It's about integrity, respect." Monica stepped forward, her gaze sharp, unwavering. "That's why we will not tolerate discrimination in any form," she said, her voice ringing through the room. "This hotel is for everyone, and those who can't align with that vision won't be part of this team." Greg swallowed hard. They knew.
Greg sat stiffly in the Crystal Tower executive suite, his palms damp against his knees. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Across from him, James and Monica Harrison sat in perfect silence, their presence as commanding as it was unnerving. Beside them, General Manager Richard Calloway remained expressionless, his hands folded neatly on the polished table. Greg had spent years in this hotel, in this very room before, but never like this. Never as the one under scrutiny. James leaned forward, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of an unshakable authority. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Greg swallowed hard, his throat dry. The past week had been a whirlwind. Outrage online, whispers among employees, the sudden realization that everything had changed. He had spent days convincing himself that what he did wasn't wrong, that he had just been doing his job, that his instincts, the ones sharpened by years in security, had simply guided him to a reasonable conclusion. But now, sitting here, face to face with the very people he had humiliated, that justification felt hollow. His chest tightened. The words felt foreign in his mouth, but they were the only truth he had left. "I was wrong." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I made an assumption. A terrible one." Monica studied him, her gaze piercing. "And what would you have done if we had been any other black couple? If we weren't the owners?" Greg felt the weight of the question crush him. He had no answer. He looked down at his hands, ashamed. Silence filled the room, thick and unrelenting. James finally broke it. "We believe in second chances, but only if they're earned." Greg's head snapped up. "What does that mean?" "It means," Monica said, "you're being given a choice. Either take responsibility, educate yourself, and prove that you can do better, or leave." Greg's heart pounded. He had expected to be fired, humiliated, cast out, forced to start over. But this was worse. "You're really giving me a chance?" His voice was hoarse, disbelieving. "Not a chance," James corrected. "An opportunity. What you do with it is up to you." Greg exhaled, the weight of guilt and relief crashing into him all at once. He nodded. "I won't waste it." Over the next few months, Crystal Tower underwent a transformation. Under the Harrisons' leadership, it became one of the most inclusive and diverse hotels in the country. Staff underwent cultural sensitivity training, and new policies ensured no guest would ever experience what James and Monica had. Greg took the training more seriously than anyone. He attended workshops, read books on systemic bias, and even worked with community outreach programs. One evening, he stood by the entrance, watching as guests streamed into the hotel. Then he spotted a young black couple hesitating near the doorway, glancing around nervously. Greg took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Welcome to Crystal Tower," he said with a warm smile. "Can I help you with anything?" The couple visibly relaxed, nodding as they stepped inside. From across the lobby, James and Monica watched the interaction. Monica leaned in. "Looks like he's learning." James smiled. "That's the point, isn't it?" And as Greg turned back to the entrance, standing tall in his uniform, He realized something. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a responsibility. And this time, he intended to get it right.